Is it fair to say in closing that Providence, relative to other major cities around the country, is relatively safe?
Providence's crime statistics are comparatively better to nearly all of our peers, and the levels of violent crime, of gun crime, of homicides, of larcenies, nearly every category is lower than our peers and lower than last year and lower than our 5-year average. The crime statistics are heading in the right direction, but I recognize that there's no amount of crime statistic that will bring comfort to someone who lost a family member, and so our goal is always to work to zero, and that's what we're doing right now, and that's what we'll continue to do.
Mayor, I just wanted to ask, the settlement was finalized last week in terms of both parties signing it. It still has to go through city council. But there are quite a number of legal fees associated with this. Target 12 looked at data between the school district and the city. It was $170,000. I guess, what do you think of when you hear that big a figure on this year's long fight?
Listen, spending money on legal fees is never something we want to do, particularly when the alternative is spending money on our students. One of the benefits of having resolved this is that now we stop the meter on the legal bills, and we can finally stop paying private lawyers instead of actually paying for something better for our kids. I'm happy that clock has stopped and that we can pay the bill. I know the city's legal bills were about $500,000. The state's legal bills must be even greater than that. This has been going on since 2019. I've only been in office 2 years, so this vastly predated me. I inherited this lawsuit from the previous administration, I inherited this dispute, and I inherited the legal bills. And so I'm happy that it's over.
And that $2 million or so in cuts, have you gotten any closer to figuring out what those cuts will be just yet?
We're working on it, and we'll be presenting it to the city council. They've asked the same question, obviously, and as is appropriate. And so we'll be able to show in the coming days exactly how that's going to add up, where we expect to find those savings. And we think that we're going to be able to get there without any real too painful cuts to city services.
And you won't have to dig into the rainy day fund for relief.
No, and that's not the use of the rainy day fund. This came up a couple times through this whole dispute. The rainy day fund, at one point the superintendent recommended the medical reserve account, which were kind of ridiculous suggestions. The rainy day fund is the city's rainy day fund for things like the 2008 financial crisis, the COVID pandemic. That's what that funding is for. And as we seek to balance this year's budget, prepare for the upcoming years as we settled, we need to do so in a fiscally responsible way. That's the kind of thing our bond agencies look for. Using the entire city's rainy day fund for something like this is irresponsible, so that is not a viable option.
Mayor, do you expect any resistance from the city council other than the type of analysis that would be responsible in a situation like this?
We've been in close contact with them throughout this process. My hope is that because of that constant communication, that the approval should go relatively smoothly. City Council is 15 independent elected officials, so I can't guarantee who's going to ask what, but I hope that our regular communication over the last couple of weeks will make approval relatively smooth.
Do you expect any of the discretionary cuts that were put on the table, most notably PVD Fest, is that still in play?
Well, the PVD Fest item will be in next year's budget. This year's PVD Fest is already paid for. And so when I submit my 2026 budget, which will happen March or April, that's when we'll outline our spending plan for the new year. But obviously last year's PVD Fest is already paid for and is not going to be a part of balancing fiscal 25, the year we're in now.
I think this was kind of mentioned a little bit earlier, but if the city is trying to get as many dollars as it can right now, we're hoping for a good winter with not a lot of snow to clear up. On the other side of that, I think you're announcing free parking downtown soon. Was there any thought to getting rid of free parking over the holidays to kind of make more revenue with paid parking?
It was discussed, but it was decided against. The free parking during the holiday is a great benefit to our local businesses, and it's already enough of a burden that we're going to be asking them with a potential tax increase later this year for next year's budget. And so the idea of also then charging their patrons for parking just felt penny wise and pound foolish. It's important to us that we have a healthy, thriving small business community. We know that they rely on the holiday season to make a majority of their revenue for the year, and we want people to shop local. And so we'll be announcing our free parking again soon, and it's something that was not seriously considered.
There's also been another homicide in Providence, and last night Councilor Roy has talked about wanting to hold some sort of emergency ward meeting to talk about the recent uptick in the North End in violence. What do you think about that? Is there something going on with gangs in that area that police are trying to calm down, or what can you say about that?
Yeah, last night's act of violence is really sad, and this is a gentleman who had been involved in an act of violence previously, and so my condolences to his family and kids, and to the neighborhood. We know that it is upsetting for anyone to know of an act of violence on their block or in their neighborhood, to hear gunfire at night. It's unacceptable. Providence Police are hard at work in solving this crime and have worked to reassure the neighbors. We don't believe that this was anything other than an isolated incident, and I don't believe that the North End, for any reason, is being targeted or somehow less safe than any other neighborhood right now. But any act of violence, particularly gun violence, is unacceptable. And so Providence Police are hard at work on this case and on continuing the work to get illegal guns off the street and to have a safer city.
And over the summer, Mayor, there was obviously a particularly tragic incident with the 7-year-old girl, and I remember specifically a cry for action. I'm just curious, since then, I don't know if you can get into specifics, what has been done to kind of help curb these types of incidents?
Yeah, I mean, thankfully, after that act of violence, through the month of August, we had sort of a really, really tough couple of weeks with several successive crimes, and then we've actually had a relatively calm fall, and so it was, in fact, not a trend that was continued through the year. But since then, we've worked closely with our community partners who do violence intervention work, and we'll be releasing additional funds to help them continue to do their work. It's not police work, but can help stop the cycle of retribution and the cycle of violence that happens in our communities. Providence Police now have new police officers who are on the road. When we had that conversation back in August, we had a class that was about to graduate starting in November. They actually are now off on their own, so neighborhoods are starting to see more police officers. And the community really came together in that moment to start some tough community conversations about making sure that folks were being communicative with the police, making sure that our community partners knew what was going on so that they could elevate issues. Sadly, we've taken hundreds of guns off the street this year, and it's still not enough. I've spoken to veteran police officers who used to talk about how 10 or 20 guns a year was a remarkably good year. We now take hundreds of guns off the street, and it doesn't scratch the surface. The proliferation of guns in the community, and then the acceptability that it's okay to resolve a dispute with a firearm results in this level of violence. And so there's no one thing that's going to solve it, but we have done more since August and since that tragic death. And I'm happy to say that we're still seeing fewer homicides this year than last year, fewer amounts of violent crime this year than last year, lower, about 20% less gun violence this year than last year. So we are heading in the right direction, but I know that's no comfort to the family of the 7-year-old or to the kids whose father died last night.
Have you given any thought to directing more mental health counselors or trauma counselors to areas where homicides or lots of violence have taken place? We got a letter from someone who put out this letter to the community at large, asking if that was a resource.
So the Providence Police has a partnership with the Providence Center, who provides clinicians to provide mental health care and trauma care, and conjunction with them. It's often deployed in the case of domestic violence or domestic disputes, but they are a resource to victims of violence in the city, and so that is an existing resource. And if there are community members who want access to that or feel like it wasn't properly communicated, they should reach out to us and let us know. They can call 311, they can call the police non-emergency number, which is 272-3121, because that resource is available to the community.
Mayor, with Providence Place Mall in receivership, we stretch back many years the decision to allow Nomura, the original financier behind the mall, to have really a generational tax treaty. I know some of those issues are about to present themselves again. Has there been any overtures from the current mall management for concessions in light of the receivership, or is that conversation ongoing?
We have not actually spoken to the new receiver about the tax treaty. The mall's general manager, the on-site person, has stayed the same. He switched from the old owner now to the receiver, and we're in touch with him about tenancy and making sure that the mall stays open and such. The new owner, as it were, has not reached out. The lawyers have made contact just to introduce themselves, but there's been no discussion about the tax treaty or anything else. It's still very, very early in that process.
Concerns appear to be bubbling up from the community about security at the mall, particularly in the holiday season, in light of some recent, admittedly anecdotal evidence. Is city police and city in touch routinely about security at the mall?
Routinely. We talk regularly to the mall security, and it is a safe place to shop at the mall. It's not something that we're casual about. We do take it seriously, but there's also no reason for concern.
Is it fair to say, in closing, that Providence, relative to other major cities around the country, is relatively safe?
Providence's crime statistics are comparatively better to nearly all of our peers, and the levels of violent crime, of gun crime, of homicides, of larcenies, nearly every category is lower than our peers, and lower than last year, and lower than our 5-year average. The crime statistics are heading in the right direction. But I recognize that there's no amount of crime statistic that will bring comfort to someone who lost a family member, and so our goal is always to work to zero. And that's what we're doing right now, and that's what we'll continue to do.
But is it time for the state of Rhode Island to get together and essentially promote the relative safety of a big city like Providence?
I think everyone should tell the accurate story. I'm not looking for anyone to try to spin a tale. The facts of the matter are our incidents of crime are quite low. It's a very safe city, and folks should be excited to either go out shopping for the holidays, enjoy one of our fabulous restaurants, enjoy our theaters, and have comfort that they can do so safely in the city of Providence, particularly over the holidays.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor.